of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tistero. Chapter 62. Monday, Part 2. Tartarus Prison, he thought, was one of those buildings that really lived up to its name. It was a giant rectangle of black, punching its way from the dirt to the sky across a long suspension bridge that allowed visitors to safely traverse the torrid, roiling waves that surged all around it.
My name is Lieutenant Sugarami of the police force. Here is my ID. I am escorting a visitor under the Prime Minister's authority into the maximum security area's interrogation block. This packet contains all of the documents you'll need to verify this arrangement.
They'd been sat in various waiting bays across the length of the impressive 5-kilometer bridge, which had no less than 3 security points. God, so this was where taxpayers' money was going, huh? For 15 minutes, his dark eyes turning to view the guards who checked his papers, his hands editing and signing every tablet thrust at him. The first series of electronic forms he had to fill in contained such bizarre questions as, was he carrying explosives, weapons, firearms? Did he have a secondary quirk that he'd failed to register? Was it his intention to disrupt, destroy, or otherwise cause damage to the prison, its staff, or inmates? Did they honestly expect someone to answer yes to any of these things? Oh, do you mean I shouldn't bring demolitions grade C4 into this prison? Oh, golly, officers, I am so sorry. How logical. He loathed needless, thankless paper pushing for the sake of creating a chain of inane information to cover someone's back if and when they messed up.
Sugarami-san, thank you. May we please have the aforementioned food item? It will be delivered to the inmates after it's been scanned.
The second? Waiver!
It's standard practice, Shouta-kun. You will be under the highest level of protection, I assure you, but never forbid I sue if something goes wrong, huh? Yeah. No, don't worry. I have to ask my study group's parents to sign something similar when I make them a water activity outside the cafe.
Tapping all of the I consent and I agree boxes had nearly given him a headache. However, he supposed they could never be too careful, considering the villains, fiends, and, he shuddered, serial killers, rapists, and abusers they had to keep locked inside. God, why was he doing this again? You're leading by example, you stupid, morally driven asshole, a little voice in the back of his mind kindly reminded him. Well, at least he wasn't being a hypocrite since he was walking what he thought.
Thank you, Lieutenant. You and Aizawa-san have been cleared to access the interrogation wing. Please make your way to the main reception where you will be issued with passes and screened before entry. Letting out a sigh, his legs were starting to cramp. He'd been sat still for close to 40 minutes. His limbs were probably wondering why they'd been forced to be inactive so long. It was coming up to the lunch rush back home, wasn't it? Shouta kept his eyes on the blackened turrets, walls, and uniformed men wandering the grounds. What a way to spend a Monday. Walking into one of the country's most secured prisons, the eatery owner hadn't known what to expect, really. Sure, he'd seen this place on the news growing up, and there were quite a few documentaries out there, but actually being inside Tartarus, well, watching the TV couldn't quite capture the oppressive feeling in the air, and stranger still, for all of its ominous ebony frontage, the inside was a stark, clinical, glaringly white. The guards, stern-faced and reserved, wore black, though, their heads duffed with caps, their hips sporting a host of gadgetry, weapons, and communications wear. Damn! But in a way, it was good to see. It was good to know that they weren't taking any of the inmates, who they were, what they'd done, what they were capable of, lightly. Sugarami-san, Aizawa-san, please follow me. They'd been greeted, after walking through 3 heavy solid metal doors, by a demure man with a cricket's head, his tall, multi-armed form primly dressed in his uniform, the green amber of his antennas twitching a little as he bowed, turned, and escorted them to a gleaming white desk manned by a large, officious-looking man. Please deposit any and all electronic devices into the box provided for you with any keys, paperwork, wallets, and other personal effects. Nodding, his hands reaching for and depositing everything on his person, even his Hello Kitty hair bubble. He'd be immensely displeased if that wasn't waiting for him once this visit was concluded. Into the wide metal container placed upon the austere surface,
His hands gave himself a carcerate pat, just to be safe. Then, with a quiet solidarity, they swiftly walked from the welcome area. A burly woman with milky eyes and a sour expression handed him a visitor's lanyard, complete with a photograph they'd taken of him, and through another long gleaming corridor bracketed with sensors, scanners, and goodness only knew what else. Nothing hurt, of course, and the various colored lights which swept over him weren't dangerous in any way. Which was something. Things had come a long way in the last 100 years. Many people today, himself included, couldn't quite believe that their ancestor had used X-rays and other dangerous things so commonly. He guessed. Thank you, gentlemen. Now we'll be entering an elevator which will take us down to the sub-basement interrogation suite. Don't worry if your ears pop due to the change in air pressure, as that is perfectly normal. Oh, joy! Wandering into a similarly bright, featureless interrogation room, Shouta sighed. No scripts, no lines, no person talking in his ear. Shigaraki had said under no uncertain terms that he'll refuse to talk if your conversation is staged. All we ask is that you keep him company for the half hour, Aizawa-san. He will allegedly speak to us formally afterwards. So far, it was just him. He could see a thick glass panel splitting the room in two, with a chair positioned before a white plain desk where a microphone and speaker system were anchored. Humming to himself, a habit he'd probably never be able to break, he approached the seat and sat down, his eyes casting around the empty void-like space, the silence of it deafening. It was suffocating, but as he centered his breathing, a quick word of thanks fluttered from his mind to Moto-sensei and the breathing exercises he'd instilled in him. He folded his arms, closed his eyes, and waited. God. However, he wasn't waiting long. Eyes opening, he stifled a yawn born of boredom, then tiredness. The 21-year-old sat a little straighter in his chair, out of a politeness the other didn't deserve, but still, smoothed down his pants, and watched as the massive door on the other side of the glass ground open with a metallic hiss. Then, in some weird parody of a hospital scene, 5 armed guards escorted Shigaraki into the opposite side of the chamber, his body strapped into a wheelchair, a series of machine guns lowering from the ceiling or slithering out of the floor. Aizawa-san, how nice of you to visit me, and with one of those delightful pies of yours, too. Watching on dispassionately, his black-suited arms crossing, Shouta regarded the men bolting the chair in place before turning his attention to the deceptively normal, congenial-looking man who seemed to be the same respectful gentleman who had strolled into his eatery and turned his sense of peace upside down.
Shigaraki-san,
he acknowledged with a nod, because antagonizing him was pointless, for better or worse. Just him being here could help other people. He needed to remember that.
Have you settled in?
He asked, his expression ruthlessly neutral as the other let out a laugh, his smile just as white and wide as the room. It's a little bare for my liking. However, as prisons go, I suppose it will do, he mused pleasantly. So tell me, how is young Tomura faring? Is he well?
Don't let him roil you with this loaded question bullshit.
He heard another voice, suspiciously like, "Dummies!" warning from the recesses of his mind.
Considering all he's lived through, I'd say he's doing remarkably well,
he returned mildly.
He's a wonderful young man, to give it time. I believe he'll be able to put the trauma you've caused behind him,
he added, his eyes narrowing a touch when the other puffed out a chuckle.
Oh my, oh dear,
the salt-and-pepper-haired man smirked.
If only you knew what kind of wonderful young man he truly is, what he did to his family, you... I'm well aware,
he cut in, his shoulders shrugging.
Worse still, I have a sneaking suspicion that you orchestrated the whole thing,
he stated cryptically. It was well known that the Shimura family had died all those years ago. Kenji-san had shared the report with him. He'd not told him what Tomura had confessed to. It was an accident, after all.
From what little I understand about your quirk, Shigaraki-san, you're able to take other people's powers and, if you choose, you can pass such things to others, yes?
He furthered those acetylene eyes regarding him gleefully.
Tomura was considered quirkless until he met you. Isn't that right?
Ha-ha! So he did confide in you and your other boy, then? How marvelous! The older tittered, that smile never leaving his features.
Ah, you do continue to surprise me, Aizawa-kun. Or would you honor me being allowing the use of your first name, You can call me anything you like, he replied, completely nonplussed. And how would you prefer me to address you? Shigaraki will do in the first instance. The slightly wrinkled villain returned with a gentle incline of his head. Now then, Shouta-kun, I have done a great deal of pondering since our little spat the other day, he allowed. The guard stood in a row behind him, shifting uneasily at the menacing tone, alighting those deceptively carefree words. Would you like to have a guess as to what's been dominating my mind? Meeting those ethereal eyes, the eraser quirk user allowed his disappointment to roll off of him in waves. Admittedly, he began, his head cocking to the side. I haven't had a great deal to do with villains, he continued, one's brows momentarily lifting. However, if you were to follow all of the cliches they like to ham up in movies, I should imagine you're about to thrill me with all the terrible, awful things you'll do once you're free. He shrugged. You'll threaten the people I care about, and seeing how eloquent you are, I should imagine the monologue I'm about to hear will be particularly graphic. He nodded, his eyes rolling, because he couldn't help himself. He was only human. Even as some of the guards muttered, Ah, so you believe yourself so safe, so untouchable, you... Oh, no, not at all, he interrupted before leaning a little further forward, their eyes locked. In fact, it's quite the opposite, he explained, the crime lord blinking at him. There was not a single doubt in my mind that any vengeance you wanted to level against me would be beyond any nightmare I could imagine, he told him, his gaze unwavering. However, just like all catastrophic disasters, what can I do to stop it? He asked, his hands raising. At Shigaraki's smile dimming slightly, he carried on. Because seeing me scared is exactly what you want, isn't it, you creepy old duck? I could beg you to leave my family alone, but that'd probably just give you something to laugh at before you carried out your threats, he reasoned. So there's no point in thinking about what you'd do or when you'd do it, right? He edged. It's illogical and irrational to waste precious time fretting over anything you can't control, based on your track record, ability to cause destruction, and your disregard for anyone other than yourself. Trying to convince you to do anything is far beyond my capabilities, isn't it? He acknowledged mildly before leaning back in his chair. However, since you seem to be in the mood for a chat, may I ask you something? Ah, ask away, my dear, the villain crooned, his face now pleased once more, his tone warm. I can't claim to know you or understand your motives, but from what I've been told, you believe that All Might has something that you want. That's why you killed his mentor, and the two of you have been warring ever since, he said, their eyes lacking once more. You want to know about what he stole from me, ne? No, he answered, his head shaking lightly, the fiend's astonishment registering in the back of his mind. More secrets than Porto Shinori. My question is more of a hypothetical one, and one you wouldn't need to give details to. It's just, being such different people, I'm curious, he admitted. Let's say that you're successful in taking his quirk, or whatever it is you want, he allowed. And let's say you deal with the people you see as your enemies. Well, what then? That's my question, he reaffirmed, his brows arching wryly. I'm not trying to pry for details, he tried, his shoulders rolling. Because to me, I can't really imagine anything worse, he told him, his frown saddened. Oh? You would shirk at unimaginable power? The freedom that would bring? Ha! You expect me to believe that, Shouta-kun? You don't have to believe it, he replied, a wry smile momentarily lighting his features. That's honestly how I feel, he furthered. The way I see it, if you used your power to rule over the country, the world even, then you'd be reigning over two kinds of people, wouldn't you? He questioned. Those who fear you and kowtow to keep their lives, and those who would actively look for ways to usurp you and take your power for themselves. He reasoned, thinking about that logically. What's to like? What's to enjoy? He asked. You called it freedom, but it sounds like all you'd do is make a cage of work for yourself to be trapped in. You wouldn't be able to rest. You wouldn't be able to trust anyone, would you? He mused. Ha! You're forgetting that I'd slaughter any competition without a second thought. No, I'd factored that in, actually. It'd be irrational not to, and Shigaraki-san, therein lies your next big problem. He warned, with that kind of mentality, who would be left by the time you were done. He queried, because the fear that kind of behavior would inspire would lead people to fighting and resisting. We've seen this throughout history, right?
Watching as the other frowned subtly, that Cheshire smile long gone, the eatery owner continued.
Surely even you wouldn't want to rule over a kingdom of ashes and dirt.
He mused.
Oh well, to see you want and work towards such ends that it frustrates me beyond words, because I meant what I said to you on Thursday.
He sighed.
Just think of all the good you could do. He grumbled. There are hundreds of children born with quirks that make them miserable, that hurt them, that make other people fear them, and ruin their lives. He reasoned. And you could help them. You could remove their quirks or help to shape them into something more manageable. I mean, my God.
He huffed, his tone incredulous.
Shigaraki-san, to do such things wouldn't mean that you got to rule the world, but hell, the money, fame, adulation, and gratitude you'd get. How can you level that against killing and acting selfishly just because you can?
Tsukurame hadn't liked this idea from the moment his boss had called him into the office. And yet, as he stood in the secreted viewing box above the pair, he couldn't help but feel... Did that young man just try to give our country's #1 villain careers advice? Proud and ridiculously so! Sure, they'd talked about what the raven-haired youth could expect. They'd run through some scenarios, and he continued to tell him adamantly that any and all protection he could grant to him and his young family was already theirs. Kenji-san, where did you find this kid? And just like he always did, the eraser quirk user continued to baffle and similarly amaze, because here he was, his posture radiating what Sansa had affectionately called the no fucks given cat bad stance, in the face of someone whom had committed a previously unheard of depth and breadth of evil that spanned over the last 100 years easily.
That's classified information, I'm afraid, he told the two guards sat at the desk which hosted a plethora of screens, their fingers flying over 4 keyboards as the discussing pair were monitored, scanned, checked, and recorded. And before you ask, no, he's much too busy to be coming down here every so often to babysit that old bastard, he stated firmly.
Lieutenant, I'm sorry to disturb you, but...
Blinking, his brows lifting, as the delightful, cat-loving young woman who did shifts at Tartarus contacted him directly, the dog-quirked officer fished out his phone and prepared to respond to her via text message. He'd slipped a selection of Noranago business cards to the front desk. He was pretty sure that pro-hero Mandalay would enjoy the cafe and its feline lounges, alongside a few other guards. Besides, having more powerful people befriend Shouta and protect his establishment couldn't be a bad thing, right?
Oh, mine is here, sir!
Oh
shit! And he's on his way to see you!
Letting out a sigh, his fingers and thumbs tapping away a reply, the lieutenant grabbed his hanky from the inside pocket of his suit and dabbed his brow. Thank you for the heads up, Mandalay. His message wrote, could you please contact my secretary and advise her that I'll be late to my next meeting? I'll advise her to clear my schedule completely.
He added, his dark eyes shifting to the secured door, the sweat drops at his temple quadrupling as the guards outside, whom he could see through the viewing window, visibly bugged.
I might not be making it back to the office today.
Shirataku Tomiko loved her laugh right now. Nobori was a darling. Her wit, incredibly sense of humor, and beautiful laugh filled her with a joy she never knew she'd been missing. She had, hands down, the world's best boss. She got the fun of her tats and get paid for it. Plus, she now had a gaggle of adorable little brothers and sisters. She had always wanted siblings, but with her parents divorcing when she was 4, their relationship beyond repair, and then her father disappearing from her life completely, it had never happened. Even when her mother married someone else, a man who disapproved of her clothing and sexuality, the closest thing to children she'd been raised with were cats. Not that that mattered now, no. She was happy now. She had friends, actual friends, who laughed at her antics, enjoyed who she was as a person, didn't criticize her love of cheesy pop music, and actively sought her out to spend time with. And life indeed was good. What do you mean I didn't know? So when her girlfriend squealed in a way that suggested actual distress, she vaulted over the service bar and ran to where Nomori was stood in the gaming area. Blinking, her face turning this way and that for any danger, she skidded to a stop and regarded Dabby Dabs, Tomotomo, and Fushi-chan, these were their names, and the 4 local pros wouldn't be told otherwise, from where they sat. On the beanbags, the lilac-haired boy sniggling into the oldest teen's lap. So cute! As they looked on. Innocently? There was something on that look. But these were ponderings for later, weren't they? What's happening? What's wrong? Where's the danger? She asked her amber irises shrinking around her pupils as the long-made beauty stiffly turned to face her. Those lovely features, white and sheepish, her cobalt eyes shimmering as she held up her phone. Also, in the booth closest to the gaming area, Sanza-chan and Neo-kun were similarly ashen, their fingers tapping away rampantly at their laptops, their fresh coffees long forgotten, both looking distressed. Blinking and looking from the teens who seemed to be snickering conspiratorially, Tomoko took the device and allowed her eyebrows to climb to her hairline. Minute. Hey, big guy! Do you have any idea when Tsukurame-san will be bringing show back? His kittens don't want to bother you, but that's what Big Sis Nemu-chan is for, right?
All Might. Hey, the Mori-san! I'm good to hear from you. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you mean.
Minute. What? Sorry, Sensei. I thought for sure that you'd be at Tartarus with them, and that's why their trip was taking so long. Never mind. Sorry for bothering you. Have a great afternoon.
All Might.
Oh no.
Tomoko thought, her head lightly shaking as her girlfriend sank to her knees with a long, perishing groan. All Might. No! Where?